Aloha, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with our next presentation. Again, this is why communities resist density. With our moderator and presenter, she's an expert planner, advocate, and author, Dr. Wendy Sarkisian. Wendy, if you could share your screen. And our panelists, longtime real estate broker and activist Choon James, community advocate and founder of Livable California, Dr. Susan Kirsch, and Ron Iwami, president of Friends of Koalos.
Okay, here we go. Can people hear me now? Can you see me?
We can hear and see you. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry about that. We've got some Virgin Zoom workers here on our team. I want to welcome everybody to this session and to say that we're not the density resistors ourselves. We are the people talking about resistance to density. So we have 4 presenters today, and I'm just going to tell you who our presenters are. The first one is me. I'll come back to me in a minute. Susan Kirsch, I'm calling the Catalyst. She's from Marin County in California, and she's the founder of Livable California. She's going to speak after me. Susan is also the founder of Catalysts for Local Control in California and sees herself as a catalyst. She started in her neighborhood, then went countrywide, and has been involved in establishing statewide groups in California. And the common theme of her work is advocating for stewardship. Susan is keen on solving problems at any level in her garden, at her neighborhood, or in statewide legislation. She likes to cook without recipes. Ron Iwami, I'm calling the protector for our session today. He's the president of Friends of Koalos on Oahu, and their mission is to protect, preserve, and Malama Koalo Basin Park and the surrounding shoreline and the ocean to ensure that the recreational user will continue to have access and the ability to enjoy for future generations. What that is about is caring for, tending, attending, preserving, and protecting. Ron is a retired fire captain for the Waikiki Fire Station. And he says, when I asked him to say something about him, he's been surfing for my soul for over 50 years of my life. Welcome, Ron. And we have Choon James. I'm calling her for today our environmentalist. Choon is a former mayoral candidate for Honolulu in 2020. She is originally from Singapore. She's a real estate broker in Oahu for over 30 years and a longtime activist with Keep the Country Country to preserve rural resources, farmlands, and open spaces for a thriving, diversified, and sustainable Oahu. Choon is an organic farmer, a writer, and an environmentalist, and involved in many community organizations. Because I've eaten into my time, I'll just tell you I'm a retired community planner with a specialty in 2 areas that we're talking about today, community engagement and residential density. So I'll see if I can make this work now, and then we can talk about my presentation. I'm talking about the turbulent river of negative responses to proposed housing density increases and why people are opposing higher density housing. There's so many motivations, and there is a wide discussion about some of the reasons why people oppose medium density housing. Some of those points are on the screen here. While you're looking at the screen, I just want to talk about the last point. In my work in Australia for nearly 50 years, working a lot of time in this field, I've found that many residents who seem to be opposing higher density housing are actually thinking altruistic thoughts. They're even asking who could live like that. They're asking about the people who are moving into the proposed new housing, and their positions aren't always just selfish positions. The 2 tributaries to this turbulent river of opposition to higher density housing are basically poor housing design and insensitive community engagement. And I was very happy to hear Stanley talk about both of these issues, because if you're to tackle this matter in Honolulu, you will have to tackle the two tributaries to the turbulent river. Because if you don't tackle housing design and you don't engage with authentic community processes, engagement processes that local people can respect and honor, you will have all the qualities of turbulence: conflict, instability, turmoil, tumult, unrest, upheaval. We have all these here in Vancouver. We have them in Australia. I know you have them in your country. So you need to begin by addressing both of those issues. And the first one is the whole issue of the psychology of housing. We are hardwired to be, as animals, connected to our housing. One of the prominent authors in this area for decades is the American John Zeisel, who's in Massachusetts. And his beginning work, Inquiry by Design, raised a lot of the psychological stuff about housing that we seem to have forgotten. Humans are animals. We are attached to place. We are concerned about the messages that community people read from new housing that's being proposed. We need housing that has congruence with our needs, that seems to fit in our neighborhood. We're very concerned about matters of image. We want opportunities to personalize our spaces. And for many of us, the house is a mirror of ourself. We want housing in our neighborhoods that reflects the values of the residents and of the neighborhood. But more than anything, we need to make the point that home is our territorial core. So when new housing is proposed in neighborhoods, we need to understand that people may feel that their territory is being threatened or violated. And this is our familiar zone where we feel safe. Humans are hardwired to protect our territory. So if we're hardwired for territorial behavior, we can look at what could be called NIMBY behavior as being territorial behavior, or indeed place attachment. The other thing is that housing is a communicating mechanism. Any environment is a communicating mechanism, and the housing that's being proposed will communicate certain values. Here's my tropical house in Australia a few years back. It communicates a lot of messages. You can't see the solar panels on the roof, but that's a message. It's also a message that I'm a woman who lived in California in the Bay Area of San Francisco in the 70s and was influenced by the disability access movement then. So I have a tropical house that is accessible to people with a disability. That's a very important value I encoded in my house. The second tributary to this turbulent river is community engagement. In a community meeting, we're always asking what's going on here. This was one of the worst meetings of my whole life. It's right before Christmas because the Minister for Housing in New South Wales in Australia wanted something to announce before Christmas. So we're 4 days before Christmas, and I'm telling residents of a low-income public housing estate that we're going to demolish their neighborhood. Now, they're not going to be made homeless, but they'll live on a building site for 10 years. So we have to ask questions about how communities can have real influence. In this case, it was a public-private partnership. The builder that came in as part of the partnership went bankrupt in the global financial crisis. These residents, for all their hard work, had no influence over the decisions that were taken basically in New York that basically destroyed their neighborhood. So the question of influence is pertinent to any community engagement conversation. And the best book that I've written is by this American woman, Roz Lasker, and her colleague, John Guidry. And she talks about the issues of community engagement and how the messages of communities rarely make it through to the decision makers. She describes this process as a baton race, where you're transferring your fine-grained local knowledge to the next runner on an even track that's full of all kinds of hurdles, and you're running for your life, trying to get your knowledge to the person with clout. But often your critical local knowledge is lost, or it's not used, or some voices aren't considered knowledgeable. Who would ever ask children or young people their opinions, for example? And then the buck and your community influence stop with the person with clout. Some ideas are often just not valued at all. Some ideas are dismissed. But the big barrier to influence for anybody doing community engagement is how the values of community members expressed in forums and workshops and so on align with the values of the gatekeepers, those people with clout. And if they don't, this very, very competent piece of research shows that the ideas don't get through. They don't make it over the last hurdle, and the baton of that information is not passed on. As a result of those disappointing processes, trust is lost in bucketfuls and, as we know, gained back in teaspoons. Furthermore, bad housing infuriates people. And the beginning of the rot, we can sheet straight back to James Sterling, an English architect who started this terrible problem in the 70s. This is actually my own photograph taken in the mid-70s in Runcorn, Newtown in England. And this is my photograph too. These are not questions that I raised looking at James Sterling's innovative architecture in the 70s in a new town. This is what the residents said to me, including, are we living in a boat or what? Like, is this housing? And furthermore, if this is council housing, if this is subsidized housing, would a wealthy person live in a house like this? This doesn't even look like housing to me, is what they said to me. So if we go to my old hometown, beautiful downtown Adelaide with a metropolitan area of a couple of million people and a beautiful Mediterranean climate and lovely historical houses in the downtown. That's the house I used to live in myself. And we've got developers building housing that looks like this in downtown Adelaide, including at the left, the very artful grate over the window, over the front door below the window, which has no covering on it. It's just to articulate the facade. It can't keep the sun off you, and it certainly can't keep the rain off you when you're fumbling for your keys. Or something like this. Notice on the right here that the doors open out. So you'd have to move all the furniture in order to get in and out on this tiny balcony. The neighbors are saying, who could live like that? Or how about this? There's a charming back lane for you. You can imagine the residents of Adelaide don't like that. And they certainly don't look like what it looks like at night when a car is backing up. So if we want to engage about proposed housing density increases, how are we going to do it? We have to look at housing design. And the points that Stanley made today are so relevant. We have to look at the design of housing at the street level. Nobody's paying attention to what's happening on the 41st floor, but at the ground, the principles of design that Stanley announced today are directly relevant. And secondly, our engagement needs to be sensitive. So if we're thinking about resistance, we have to be very, very clear to address the actual concerns expressed by citizens, not what we think they're saying or what their values might be or how we might vilify their values. And we need to place less emphasis on the negatives. We must respect people's intentions. We must never label people as NIMBYs, as not in my backyard, because the research shows that place attachment, really caring for their own territory, is likely to be a guiding principle for many of these people. We have to look at the two tributaries. We have to do both of them together to the highest possible standards. I've done a blog here. It's pretty out of date, but it's still there. That's the link to the nimbiclearinghouse.wordpress.com. And this information will also be available to you later. I'm happy to talk to anybody. That's my email address there. I want to thank you very much for thinking about us as humans who are animals who love our housing. I'm hoping that for Honolulu, you can love your 1,000 homes per acre too. And my team wants to say congratulations to Annie and Stanley. Thank you. So our next speaker is Susan Kirsch from Marin County in California. You can unmute your microphone, Susan.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes,
And you can hear me? And you can hear me?
yes.
Okay, okay. So first of all, I want to thank the team that's pulled this together, Stanley, for your visionary thinking about housing and density, and Wendy, to you for laying a context about the importance of place and design and engagement. So as I was thinking about this presentation, one of the things I wanted to bring forward is that I think the question is not just why communities resist density, but it's also the key question of why communities embrace choice. And what people really want to have is a choice. And so we can see in part a vision of choices here in the two images on the right, the high density or the tree-lined streets. And I've organized my 10 minutes or so of being able to make this presentation, answering that question about why communities embrace choice, looking a little bit at density. We've heard a lot about that already today. Then I want to talk about choices in a changing world, which I think is really one of the core questions. I want to talk about what's happening in California because that's what I know best. So here we have some additional pictures of density. It was really fun to pull these off, you know, a Google search of density. And I wanted to just also raise this idea of the definition of density, which I see as basically two definitions. One is around that degree of compactness of a substance, the dense fog or the dense trees or the dense traffic or the dense housing, or as an earlier speaker said, that idea of being crammed into places. You know, dense is also used sometimes to describe like a report or a presentation or even people. So we've got that like mostly negative definitions when we're talking about fog or traffic or housing, conveying a certain element of not being so safe. But here's where I really think there's an overlooked element to what's happening worldwide around the choices that we have about how are we moving forward. And maybe the key question is the one over on the right that's asking, is housing for occupants? And should it be designed for the quality of living with security and the beauty and artistry and uniqueness of individual or family? Or are we looking primarily at housing for investor profit? In 1948, the United Nations declared housing is a human right and that everybody deserves housing for the importance of being grounded and comfortable in the life that we're living. The biggest driver of the issue around affordability is the crisis in poverty that we're facing worldwide and seeming to be getting worse. The issue is not so often zoning or even supply and demand. It is poverty and the increasing diversity between the haves and the have-nots. Sometimes people refer to that as the globalization of housing, where housing is no longer thought so much of as a home with the coziness and belongingness of home, but housing is the commodity, which is a unit of housing, and it's used to see how people, investment is a tool for investment to be able to create even more investment wealth. It's a topic I wrote about, and you've got the link there to an article that I had published in Cal Matters called Housing as that California should recognize that housing's a right, not a Wall Street commodity. And the danger of this is really pointed out as well in a book that I've pictured here by Joel Kotkin, the economist, who's written this warning book about the coming of neo-feudalism then it's a warning to the global middle class. Now, here in California, we have a couple of things that have been going on, and I want to acknowledge that where everyone is looking to operate in really honorable kinds of ways. But there's three reasons Californians have been rejecting density. The first one is that we've rejected it for the basis of numbers that have proven not to be reliable numbers. For the longest time that we were told we had a 3.5 million unit housing shortage, but thanks to research that was done at the Embarcadero Institute, that number's been shown to really be a 1.5 unit shortage. Still big, but much more manageable than the 3.5. Even Governor Newsom said, oh yeah, that was an aspirational goal, not a real figure, but it shows up over and over again in legislation. Another problem with unreliable numbers in California is that we have a system whereby every community, every city and county is given an allocation number or a quota for the number of houses that they have to be building. So in my county, Marin County, our number has just recently been announced that we're going to go from being required to build 185 units to 3,510 units. It's a 1,700% increase. And communities across the state are saying, what? We can never reach those kind of goals. Another reason Californians have been rejecting density is based on the idea of false blame and false assumptions. So it seems in an attempt to take away local authority from local city councils, cities have been blamed for the crisis in affordable housing, but cities don't build housing. So that's really not a realistic claim. And if we were pointing fingers, the more likely subject to be pointed to is the fact that in 2012, our state legislators withdrew $1.7 billion in funding that had been dispersed through 400 different redevelopment agencies. Another issue is the false assumptions. Many people I know, including some presenters here, are saying that if we could increase the supply of housing, it'll reduce the cost. But increasing the supply of market rate housing and luxury housing, which is what is most often being built in California, doesn't meet the need for housing that is affordable to lower or middle class wage earners. So it doesn't make sense that producing more BMWs will meet the need for people who can only buy a Ford. And a third issue here is that Californians are rejecting density that relies on manipulation. There's a couple of examples of that here and many more that I did not list, but one is the idea that the state is issuing top-down mandates instead of engaging in a collaborative problem-solving and visioning kind of process, knowing that all of us have a vested interest in solving the housing affordability crisis. The state is proposing the one-size-fits-all laws instead of having respect and engagement for all of those community solutions that have already been identified and are being promoted. Our legislators are promoting solutions where it doesn't seem there's been adequate analysis of what the real problem is, which is that problem of the wealth inequity. And there's a whole bunch of jargon that we're probably all familiar with, which is a part of making it more difficult to really understand what's proposed when the language is things like incentivize or ministerial review. So here in California, we have two particular bills that are troubling people, which would take away single family zoning and replace it. One bill would replace it with up to 2 duplexes, a single family home to two duplexes, and another one, Senate Bill 10, would build up to 10 units. So in response to that, many of us have been organizing to try to educate and engage and empower people. And we were successful in that just last Saturday, when we had 1,800 people who registered for a statewide town hall about those two bills. And even 2 hours later of the Zoom call, we still had 750 people on the call asking, what can we do? In a poll, voters are showing opposition to these bills, at about 70%. So in terms of how Hawaii is approaching this, again, hats off to Stanley for the understanding that engagement is a critical factor. And if you're to learn something from California, it will be that you need accurate numbers. You need to confirm assumptions and vet the assumptions, and you need to have process that engage people. Or as the Dalai Lama said, a lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. And with all the turmoil that we already have going on at a global level, it's never been more important that we are all working to increase trust and increase the feelings of security. So I want to say thank you for having me be a part of this panel. I invite people to contact me or see more of what we're doing at our website, or to call or email if you have questions or comments that we don't get to today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. Now, have we got Choon ready to come again? Choon, are you ready to load your screen? Can we see your screen?
Oops, I just
There
got,
we go. Yep.
can you hear
Thank
me?
you, Choon.
I just lost my screen.
There we go. You've got it. It's perfect.
Okay, I just lost it here on my, okay, so thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here in the dialogue with you all. And obviously you can tell I'm a density resistor. In certain ways, I believe that because we live in a small island, we need to protect Oahu's sustainability and diversity. And let me see, a map here of Hawaiian Islands. You can see Australia, how big it is, and you have to squint your eyes to find us in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And just a note again that we are the most remote island on Earth. And we also need to recognize that we have finite resources, which we must keep in mind of. And I just wanted to show you a close-up of Oahu. You will notice that about 50% of Oahu is actually taken up by the Ko'olauloa and Waianae mountain ranges. So we have very scarce land. And this is a close-up of our mountain, one of our mountain range faces. And you know, Hawaii is so beautiful. Everybody loves Hawaii. We have about 10 million tourists here every year, it seems. And a lot who come do not want to leave. And of course, then that leads to our question again. Carrying capacity, how much is too much? How much is too much for you? How much is too much for your neighbor? How much is too much for someone on the other side of the island? So carrying capacity is a very important principle that we need to keep in mind. And who wants to be like Tokyo or Hong Kong or Singapore? That is a reason that is raised quite a bit. And it is a very valid reason. Who wants to be like Tokyo or Hong Kong or Singapore or San Francisco? Fortunately, I have good news for everyone. We do have the Oahu General Plan. It was set up in the 1970s when the Japanese economy was doing so well. They were investing in Hawaii like it was a candy store. And so Governor Ariyoshi at that time was able to put all the groups together and come up with a plan as to how we want to protect our island home, and also to have economy and to have a thriving society. And this is the Oahu General Plan that was produced in the 1970s. And I know it's not in color, but there are 8 sectors that have been divided, 8 areas. So at the very bottom, you see the darkest spot. That is the primary urban center, where you have your hotels and your tall commercial buildings and your business centers and districts. And also to your left at the bottom, you have Eva, which is the second city, Ko'olina, Aulani, all those fun places, the second city. And as you go up, you have the famous North Shore, Ko'olauloa, and you see those vertical graphs, those are the farm areas and the rural areas. And so that is the Oahu General Plan, and that is the plan that ideally is the roadmap, the framework for policymakers, for developers, for whoever wants to dabble in development around this area and in Oahu. Okay, so the Oahu General Plan, I'm going to be very brief because we are out of time. It has 11 areas, general areas. You know, obviously public policy has to be overarching. We cannot cherry pick and we cannot just have boutique ideas and boutique information. A public policy has to include everyone and everybody and across the whole Oahu Island. And so the Oahu General Plan actually have several general areas: housing, economy, population, health and education, transportation, development, energy, culture and recreation, public safety, government, and fiscal management. And they're not in order, but those are the areas that are covered. And obviously, along with the Oahu General Plan, zoning designation is critical to land use. As we have mentioned before, the Oahu General Plan has designated the primary urban center where you have your hotel, your Hilton, your Ala Moana, all those busy business places, and the beaches, Waikiki. Those are all designated and zoned in the resort area, the business area, the commercial area. And again, it is important for many local people here. Nobody would want to wake up one morning and find that a hotel is going to be built next to them, or a slaughterhouse is going to be built to them, or a nuclear energy plant is going to be built next to them without any deliberation. So zoning, destination, residential, apartment, hotel, resort, industrial, heavy industrial, light industrial, and so on. Those are very important destination for a very teeny island of Oahu. And of course, we can plan all we want, but we are still humans. And so sustainability for a teeny island like Oahu is very important. This is actually a very recent photo. I believe it was last week that was taken of a food place because we were having some problems with shipping and the barges coming in. And our island home does have unique challenges. We have tsunami, we have hurricane, we also have to deal with climate change and sea level rises and all those natural occurrences that we have no choice but to address them. And I'm making this very short, but being on an island even though this is not a pretty topic, but we also need to think about landfill, where our garbage is going, where our affluence is going. And so, this is also very important that we consider this area very, very seriously and with lots of attention. Landfills and all those items. Okay, this is also very recent. Perhaps this is the latest, most current protest that we have of residents who are not happy on how the island is being managed in terms of protecting natural resources and traffic and all those issues that can create a lot of unhappiness and protests. And so it goes. All right, I'm going to end with this. Whatever we do, we must put people first. We must put residents first. And some of my panelists are from Australia or living in Vancouver or from California. The public sentiment here is that people want to keep Hawaii, Hawaii. And there are many issues that I don't have time to talk about. We have not have time to talk about the cultural issues, the respecting the host culture of Hawaii. I know that Aloha homes is almost a coined term now, but Aloha has a very Hawaiian concept to it. The Hawaiian concept of living is quite very different from living in cement cubicles in high rises. The Hawaiian Ahupu'a concept of taking care of our natural resources from mountain to the sea, and local culture appreciate living in multi-generation living, where great-grandparents and parents and grandparents and children and grandchildren all live together because they want to, and they want to do that. And let me end with this. Hawaii has one of the best environmental review laws in the world. And the environmental law will help us if we adhere to them. And the core principle is that the people who are most invested, most affected, have to have a big place at the decision-making table. And so I go back to resisting density in some ways, that we need to have diversification, we need to be sustainable, we need to take care of this basic hierarchy of needs. Homes are important, but so is food and water. And I want to end by saying that most of the people in Hawaii want to keep Hawaii, Hawaii. Most want to respect the host culture because it represents the best of humanity in a society. The values are universal, but they're also unique. And so again, let's put our residents first, the most affected people first. And I'm happy to continue this dialogue with all those who are interested. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, Choon. Thank you so much. Everybody, I just want to remind you that you've heard a real estate broker who's an environmentalist, just in case you missed that. Now, just to anchor us, we have Ron Iwami. Thank you, Ron. I'm so glad you don't have a PowerPoint. Please just unmute your microphone and let's hear from you.
Okay.
We got you there, Ron?
Can you see me? Oh, well, I just unmuted.
No,
and
we
I
need
said,
to see your face.
I said, yeah, start video. But how come it doesn't show anything?
I can see you, Ron.
Oh, you could?
Yeah, I just see the top of your head. So maybe you can move it a little bit lower. You're not
Oh,
that,
okay.
yeah,
Right
you could.
well, thank you.
As handsome as ever.
Well, as you can see, I'm not that computer savvy. So I was actually hesitant to join. But when Stanley Chang invited me, I said, I gotta do my part because he was seeking, local knowledge of one that has been living here all his life. Yeah. So uh, I just want to start by saying that I understand that there is a housing crisis here in Hawaii. There's hardly any affordable housing for the people. And as Senator Chang said in his talk, the people are leaving because there's no housing for them. But I want to express there is also another crisis going on. And that's where Friends of Kualo's, the nonprofit that I'm the president of, we are the voice of the people to convey that message to developers that want to develop. And our main goal is to preserve oceanfront land, waterfront land, shoreline land, coastal land, whatever you want to call it. Especially not only at Kewalo Basin Park, but I believe we should do it around the entire state. Because as Choon said, our land is finite. We have a lot of mountains, and livable land as you go to the ocean is not that great. And the ocean is so important to protect because of the ocean lifestyle that island people like myself have grown up to enjoy. And we see developments like Waikiki, who develop all the way to the ocean. And it's kind of like taking away the ocean lifestyle for the people who flock every day to the ocean for recreation and for sustainability. It's good for your mind, body, and soul, and keeps everyone happy and healthy. So it's very important. Yeah, we're an island state, so we're different from other countries. We are surrounded by the ocean our entire lives. We come to the ocean, yeah, not only to recreate, like I'm a surfer for 50 years, but also people come to just see open space, see the horizon, be in the fresh air, be in the sunshine. And it's very important. So with all these things said, we fought very recently in January to stop a development that would have built residential high rises up to 400 feet tall on the Kaka'ako Makai land. And we were successful in stopping the group. And unfortunately, we had to stop the host culture group who wanted to build that on their land. So it wasn't an easy fight. And they said they're going to continue again. As far as Senator Stanley, please do not put any high rises on the oceanfront land. And another reason why you shouldn't put it there is because it's a buffer zone for tsunamis and hurricanes and sea level rise, as Choon pointed out on her map. So it doesn't make sense to build on the ocean because all of these things are coming, yeah. And also creates a balance meaning Kaka'ako Mauka, which means mountainside, is filled with high-rise towers, 400 feet tall, which majority are unaffordable, $1 million up and up in price. So by creating a green belt and open space on the shoreline lands, we can create the balance of city and openness. We're not saying do not build at all. We just say do not build residential. You can build low-rise commercial things like restaurants and other things, farmers market. And so those things are people gathering places, which should be the use of the shoreline lands. So basically, you're asking you, Stanley Chang, not to build your high rises on the ocean. But I want to say that your idea, I like your idea of building, high rises, Mauka, where the rail lines will be, because I believe it will, number one, supply affordable housing for the people of Hawaii so they don't have to leave the island. And number two, it will prevent urban sprawl to the ag lands that Choon spoke so importantly about, so that we can develop our agricultural industry. And I would never think in all my life that I would say I support high rises, because I've seen how much high rises changed Hawaii, the landscape and how people live. But in this case, in this time, we have to do something. So I agree with that. And we need to, well, let me take it back. The reason why I'm so aware of the agricultural process is I saw a special called M&M's or Ketchup and M&M's. It was a documentary that really opened my eyes to the fragileness of our food supply. Yeah. So, excuse me, the phone was ringing. But anyway, the fragileness of our food supply, where Chad Buck of Hawaii Food Service Alliance, whose main job is to bring all the food to Hawaii in any way, any means, air, shipping, anyway. And he said 95% of our food is imported. And we need to develop the agriculture industry so that that changes, because we're a remote island, the most remote island chain in the world, and we don't grow our own food, only 5%. And he said during this COVID shutdown, he had to really work super hard, he and his team, to get food to Hawaii. And right now, when times are better, he said we're getting food just in time, or else Hawaii will not eat. And I think that's a really major problem that we need to correct, and we should do it now. But that's the reason why I believe, Senator Chang, your idea of building these high rises in the city, by the rail stations, on public land, make sure they're affordable, and then that will prevent urban sprawl onto the ag lands, because we need to start preserving the lands so that the farmers can come in. So in closing, I just want to say thank you for inviting me, and it was good to hear from people all over the world, to hear your views from your own countries or places and compare it to what how Hawaii is now, and our problems here also. So I really learned from this webinar, and I would like to thank Stanley Chang for doing this. And I think this whole recording should be spread as far as possible so that people would get good ideas like I got from this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Okay.
Stanley, if you're listening, I must say, to me, it feels as though, Stanley, if you're listening, it feels to me as though you've got the possibility of common ground there, and that's very encouraging. I'm going to hand over to our coordinator for the questions now. If you're putting questions in the Q&A, please make sure you're saying who your question is for.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to all of our panelists. I think this has been a great discussion so far. I know we have time for questions, so I'm going to toss it to our amazing moderator, Evan. Evan, Do we have questions for any of our panelists?
Yes, thanks, Lynn, and thanks to all our panelists for this presentation. We do have some questions for specific panelists, but before we go to those, I want to ask a question that all the panelists can answer. And so hopefully we can, this question can open it up really big. So hopefully we can maybe just say one or two things, but for each of the panelists, what is one step or one action item that you think that the state, that Hawaii, or wherever you are should take to begin to bridge the divide between developers and the public sector and communities?
Okay, I'll start here. The number one thing in community engagement is to make sure that people who make contributions in public events, workshops, and so on can track their influence to see where it goes, so that they know that they are being heard and their voices are making their way to the decision makers. It's got to be a feedback loop. It's got to be very clear and hugely ethical.
Okay, I'll jump in. Can you hear me? This is Choon James.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I would say that we already have the Oahu general plan in place. And it behooves the government officials to learn more about the plans and the parameters, and also the developers to learn more about the plans and the parameters. I believe that people are fair enough to know that we need to diversify, but people are also willing to hear and listen and to cooperate if they feel that the system is fair and that everyone is following the same rules and the same ordinances and all the good parameters that are set forth in our land use for Oahu.
So I'll jump in next just to say, I would encourage anybody to spend a lot of time to look into what's happening with the globalization of housing. And that what we find here is that investment speculators are coming to people's homes with hundreds of thousands of dollars over the asking price in order to gain access to people's land. And so that they can use the land to build vertical space, and that just has tremendous impact on the value of the land. So I would just say the whole focus should be on what is happening in the globalization of housing and who is it that's coming in to buy and own the land. So that's my contribution.
Have we got a comment from you, Ron?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes. We
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah, my comment kind of dittos Wendy's of community engagement, because I experienced that firsthand, where all the developers and the government that allows them to do what they want to do, just do these supposedly community engagement meetings, but it's just a formality to go through to get everything passed. What the community says is really not, is ignored really. But when you're there, they make you feel that your voice is heard. But when it really hasn't, and they're proceeding with their game plan. So I feel that's very important, that community engagement, it starts from there between the developer, government, and the people. And if not, you're going to get unhappy people, and it's going to stall the process, and you'll become a big mess. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
In other countries, Ron, we call that the American way of community engagement.
Yes.
It's the great
American
American
way.
way, and the great
Yeah.
American way will never work in a situation like this. It's absolutely got to be deeper and richer, more authentic, and a lot more community control, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I want to say that we, I had no experience of, organizing people, but we did just because we had the passion for the land and we're able to stop a government and private partnership, major development in Kaka'ako And the best part is through that opposition, a major landmark law was passed that you cannot build any residential in Kaka'ako from now to forever unless people, like we just had to fight in January, try to change that law. But it does work. People power works. That's it.
Okay, thanks to all our panelists for that. One more question we have comes from John Kawamoto. This is specifically for Wendy, but other panelists may add their thoughts as well. He says, residents of any neighborhood will almost always oppose new housing, despite good design, because they have gotten used to the status quo. Should new housing really be only built on raw land?
No, I don't think that's fair. I think there are lots of sites where infill housing is appropriate. But one of the elements that's often left out of this engagement process is a community education component. You know, that if the community can educate the developer and the developer and their helpers can educate the community, people can come to a better understanding. What we're looking for is a shared coming to public judgment. Not just information, not sharing information and not just gathering opinion, but developing processes where communities can actually come to public judgment about these matters. The thing about that is it takes time and it costs money.
So if I can jump in to respond to that question too, the reason I'm so keen on bringing up this idea of the globalization of housing is just the example of what's happening here in California, where the zoning change that's proposed will make developers able to come into any of our areas zoned for single family zoning and convert it to duplexes or to as many as 10 units. And that's going on at the same time that we have malls and commercial corridors that are running down or have a lot of vacancies, but already have the infrastructure for water and sewage and power lines and all of that our single family neighborhoods do not have. And it seems as if this is that kind of land grab going on for single family neighborhoods, a kind of colonization of single family neighborhoods in the hands of big wealthy developers, rather than being open to looking at where are some of the alternative places where housing and appropriate dense housing could be built, rather than targeting our single family neighborhoods.
Right. This is Choon James. Susan has made a very good point. And I think that here in Hawaii, we like to say that we want to think local, but we want to think global and we act local. Again, back to the Oahu general plan, there is already a master plan, so to speak, for the entire island. And that there are destinations, there are zoning destination, residential apartments, business, commercial. And so we think that the most peaceful way and the most fair way for anybody, the government or its cronies or its developers, is to respect and understand and adhere to that. And if they are going to usurp those destinations, then expect a fight from the people. And I feel that the local people have every right to fight to protect their residential homes, because they choose to live in a residential neighborhood because they want to. If not, they could have gone and bought an apartment down somewhere else. And so again, back to the Oahu general plan, there's already a framework. The city already have its land use designations and ordinances. All we need to know is to study those plans and framework in the books and go on from there, and not try to keep pushing the envelope, because that is where controversy begins, when developers do not respect the most affected people in Oahu.
Okay,
I just wanted to say something also about future generations. This has been a really adult-centric conversation. In the work that we've been doing in Australia over many decades, we're always listening to children. We're always asking their visions of the future, what they think the future should look like. And I think we need to make very sure that we're not limiting this to one generation. We need an intergenerational approach, because the children and the young people can educate us about what's important. I think we've seen that globally. So whatever you're planning in from an engagement point of view, Stanley, please bring the children into the conversation.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you make, Wendy. I just have grandchildren coming who are visiting from New York and also from Washington. I have 12 grandchildren, and I've asked them questions. We've been all over Oahu, and I just subtly ask them, what are the differences in this island? What do you like? What do you not like? And you know, it's very interesting. As a real estate broker and also meeting a lot of people do want to have diversity. They value the keep the country region. They also enjoy Waikiki, and they also enjoy the open space, the public beaches. Yeah, you know, children certainly need to be involved, but I am also saying there's an inherent natural affinity to open places, to beautiful beaches, and you know, condominiums are okay too.
okay. Can I make a comment? This is Ron. I think, yeah, most people, it's a true statement as what Senator Stanley Chang said, is everybody has place attachment. Like I live in a single family valley called Manoa Valley, and I would never want to see a high rise in the valley. Yeah. But I think Stanley thought about that. That's why he's suggesting building it away from these single family home communities and in this inner city by where the rail will be on public land. Because already in the inner city, there is already high rises. There's so many. And if it's going to be helping the affordable, I mean, the local people to be affordable, then I think there will be some give to that. That's just my comment. Thank you.
I think we might be at the end of our session. Is that a fair comment? I'm very sorry that we ran over. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. We have a little buffer. We want to make sure that we get to at least most of our questions. I think Evan may have one more. Is there one more question for the panel?
Yeah, we can do one more question. That'll work. This one we can address to everyone. But essentially, the question was about Hawaii, but we can make it a little more broad for those who do not live in Hawaii. So in areas of current high density, right? So like Oahu, should we be encouraging people to also move out to other more rural areas, for example? So this attendee gave the Big Island as an example, since there's a lot more open land for people to live there. Should we be encouraging that movement, or should we just be focusing on monitoring and changing the communities we already have?
I'll go first. I think the biggest issue here is the issue of congestion and automobile dependence. So moving people to the outer areas in Oahu, I don't think that's going to work. Sending them to the other islands, I mean, that's a matter of personal choice. I think it's going to be hard to get government programs to support that. But one of the huge arguments in favor of higher density housing is the environmental issue. And it's been interesting to me that nobody has mentioned the terrible problems with traffic congestion that you've got in Oahu. I had a friend who used to leave home at 4:30 in the morning and sleep in her basement parking lot in the office when she got to work, and then go to work finally at 8:30 because she didn't want to travel for 4 hours in congestion. So there's such huge environmental imperatives. We don't want to be having people moving further out and then creating further issues around automobile dependence?
Well, I think that, again, this is a personal preference. I do not believe in government steering people to places. That's actually illegal. but what I'm going to say again is that Oahu fortunately has a Oahu general plan. And it is a diversified plan, and it is a plan where people can choose where they want to go. If I want to go live in Mililani or Ko'olina or Honolulu or Kaneohe, I can. But I chose to live in the rural areas. And I think that there is a misunderstanding. I've heard that before. Some developers have actually said, hey, let's just turn the whole of Oahu into they do not say concrete jungle, but that's what it meant. And then we can have all the agriculture and the food in a big island and elsewhere. But that is not sustainable. Each island should be sustainable of its own. And so again, back to the Oahu general plan, there are diversification. And and certainly there is room for building more housing because we need it. But I want to end by saying that yes, we can have increased density, but we ought to make sure that all the basic needs are met first, including food, water, landfill. Knowing that Hawaii imports 90% of our food. Singapore also imports actually 100% of its food, but it is now going back to the basics and trying to promote food sustainability. So again, we can increase density. We will have to, but we should have a basic foundation secure and set, and that is making sure that we have food sustainability, water, landfill, and all those basic elements that a good society and a thriving society needs to have.
So this is Susan, and I will just chime in agreement with what Wendy and Choon have said, that I think this should not be an either or kind of question, that really the health of our cities and our lives always depend on having as many choices as possible. So I think it really is that matter of choice. And again, I would point to California is often commented on as being a bellwether state. We set trends, and it's why I'm nervous about the globalization of housing, because Choon, as you were saying, you've got a general plan. All of our cities have general plans as well. And these two bills that the community came out in force in objection to is because it would overrule our general plans. It is the idea that the state could take its authority saying we have to do something and use that as their reason to change our general plans and force new zoning rules that we've never had before. There's no public notice, there's no public hearings, there's no vote by the city council. It would be the statewide rule as a top-down kind of rule. So again, be cautious of California as a bellwether state, a trendsetter on that kind of practice.
Well, I agree with all the panelists that it's a personal choice of where you want to live, and government should not be involved in moving people if you do not want to go. And as far as the traffic, I totally agree with you, Wendy. It's horrendous here. And that's why I think they're going to build the rail for the people on the west side to come into town without a car. And also, if Stanley builds his towers near the rail stations in Honolulu, those people do not need a car. So that's just my comments. Thank you.
So may I add one more thing to that in terms of what Ron just said, is that for most families, for many families, being able to buy a home is their surest way of being able to build equity and to have an asset that gives them flexibility and freedom and some confidence and security into retirement. That for some of us in my circles, we question whether people should become accustomed to owning a bicycle as their major asset. You know, if not a house, it's a car. And the dependence on bicycles is another way of looking how people are getting squeezed smaller and smaller into what everybody, many people should have as an asset, not the wealth accumulating in the hands of fewer and fewer very, very globally wealthy people.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of this panel. I want to thank all of you. I know that there was some fierce coordination that went on with all of you prior to this. It's been a pleasure getting this set up with all of you. Thank you.